So it has been over a year since I talked about Dejounte Murray. He is one of my guys. He's one of those dudes who I keep tabs on. One of those young guys who I am high on, and I think he can be awesome. But he lost a year because of an ACL injury, and he spent a whole season kind of getting back. With that being said, I think there are some things to point out about his season for the Spurs. He averaged 11 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. His shooting, it took a jump. I mean, he went from 0 threes a game, basically, to 38% on 1.5 threes a game. His free throws got better. He went from 71% to basically 80% on about the same amount of free throws per game. And his mid-range numbers went up as well. In last year, the last season he played, he shot 37% on long twos. This year he shot 45% on them. His 10 to 16 foot shots were better as well. He was about 50% on those. So okay, we're gradually going in the right direction with Dejounte's shot making. But of course it wasn't a huge jump. And I do want to talk about the shooting a little bit more. So Dejounte's form looks like a guy who was not a natural shooter who figured out how to shoot. In the sense of, it's a little mechanical. Like, you can tell that he's trying to remember all the parts of his jump shot when he goes up with it. But it looks good. So it's like he's doing all the right things, and I feel like he's just in the process right now of it just becoming muscle memory for him. So does that mean that he can start chucking him up next season? I don't know. I mean, it's tough to tell with that stuff. Like, some guys it takes a few years, other guys they just show up and it's like, wait a minute, this guy can shoot threes now, Like, you remember TJ Warren? He didn't shoot threes for 4 years. And then his last year with the Suns, he shot over 40% on 4.5 threes a game. So perhaps Dejounte could be in a similar thing. I mean, Lonzo took off with his three-point shooting in 1 year, and even as the biggest Lonzo fan in the world, even I was like, I was not expecting that one at all. And Dejounte doesn't have to make a major adjustment with his form, if you ask me. So, yeah, maybe. But it's a process. I feel like if you watched Dejounte shoot in practice or before a game, he would look like an awesome shooter. So, yeah, again, I feel like he's going in the right direction there. We should talk about those mid-range jumpers, because he does like to shoot them, and I don't know if it's because he is a little hesitant going to the rim. I mean, he did get an ACL tear. That can get in your head for a little while, so we'll have to see if he can perhaps get a little more reckless going to the rim. I mean, the last year he played, 2018, 41% of his shots were at the basket. This year it was about 30% of his shots, and he traded a lot of those in. Well, some of them for more threes, but also a few of them for more mid-rangers. And while he has been good from mid-range, you would still want him going to the basket, because that's always going to be more efficient. Now, there's a couple things with that. For one, Dejounte still needs to put on some weight. This was back in June of 2019, so this is a year ago. But he said that he was up to 180 pounds. He's 6'4". That's still not heavy enough. To me, he can get to at least 200 pounds. Like 6'4", 200 is a pretty normal-sized human being at that height. So I feel like he's got to get to at least that. Maybe he can gain a little bit more after that. I mean, you don't want to push it, of course, but he's thin. It's one way to put it. And that might not help him as much attacking the rim. The other thing is, I feel like he still has some progress to make with his handle. His dribbling is still a little loose. Like, he can bust out a move every now and then, but he's not a great ball handler right now. So I guess it kind of makes sense why he attempts quite a few pull-ups when you combine the lack of being a great dribbler and not being huge on top of, again, when you have an ACL tear, it's going to be in your head for a little bit. It just is, So we'll see if he can keep going in that direction. But for what it is worth, again, he's been good for a mid-range this year. So maybe Dejounte is just going to be an awesome pull-up shooter. I mean, the amount of shots that he's taking from mid-range does not compare to, let's say, Chris Paul, but his percentages do. I mean, 45% on long twos is amazing if you attempt a lot of them per game. So, maybe that'll be the avenue for Dejounte. But again, we would really like to see him attacking the basket and stuff. This is something to bring up, though, is maybe Dejounte is not meant to be a lead ball handler. I'm just saying, he's 23 years old. Granted, he lost a year, I know. But he's 23 years old, and he's just not one of the best ball handlers in the league. Would it not hurt San Antonio to pair Dejounte up with more of a ball handling guard, whether it's in the draft or whatever else? I mean, DeRozan kind of served as that this season. I don't know. I mean, one of the beauties of Dejounte is he's an awesome defensive player. I mean, I haven't mentioned that at all, but that's just a given. So I feel like you can play him with a guard, and it's going to be totally fine because Dejounte can defend whoever you need him to defend on the perimeter. I don't know. We'll have to see what the Spurs want to do there. I mean, there are a decent amount of ball handlers in the draft between Killian Hayes, LaMelo, which LaMelo on the Spurs would be the wildest thing ever, but there's also Tyrese Halliburton, so I don't know, like maybe Dejounte is just not meant to be a lead guard running a million pick and rolls a game. But again, we're going to have to see, because the dude, I mean, he lost a year, but in a way he kind of lost 2 years, because that's just usually how ACL tears go. How can I project Dejounte moving forward? I guess, well, actually I should talk about his passing a little bit. I haven't mentioned his playmaking at all. I mean, the numbers certainly liked his passing. His assist percentage was up. His turnover percentage was down. And I feel like overall I feel like it's similar to his ball handling. Like he's not as good as the average point guard is as a playmaker, but he's better than the average wing right now. So I don't know. Take that for whatever you will. He seems okay. He's good at making the obvious pass. Granted, 95% of it might just be them calling a play from Pop, but I mean, not every NBA player can execute passes even under that circumstance, so that seems okay too. So if I try to project Dejounte, give him a couple years, all that, we assume the ACL stuff is totally behind him. I mean, there is a chance he's like Iguodala, where he's an awesome defender, secondary ball handler, can make an open shot, but it's kind of iffy depending on the day of the week. He'll grab a solid amount of rebounds, and overall he's a big positive piece for you, but if you were looking to see him become like a superstar or a great scorer, then you might be a little disappointed. But even then, his contract is amazing, so if that's what he becomes, then that's great. I mean, I don't think his contract ever even hits $20 million, so that's awesome. And then the high end for him would be if his shooting took off, if his finishing around the rim and just getting inside took off, and then we'd be looking at a guy who's, potentially one of the best players in the league. But that's a lot to ask for. To me, Dejounte's stat line when he's in his prime is probably going to be something like 16, 17 points, 6, 7 rebounds, somewhere between 4 to 6, maybe 7 assists a game. All defense guy many times, and overall beloved by NBA nerds for his ability to impact the game on things that don't show up in the box score, even though his actual box score would still be pretty okay. But I do want to say it again. I am interested to see if the Spurs decide Dejounte is our point guard no matter what, or if they're going to look to get some more ball handling and, a lead guard who's farther along than Dejounte with his playmaking and stuff. And I think they've got a real opportunity to kind of dictate where they want to go with that in this upcoming draft. So we'll see what they want to do. We're a few months away from that one, though.